Welcome to the Microchip Is podcast. Join your host, Mike Maynard, as he learns about the technologies, products, and people that make microchip technology what it is today.
Welcome to the Microchip Is podcast. Today, my guest is Ian Saturley. Ian is the Senior Manager, Strategic Marketing for the USB and Networking Group at Microchip. And Ian's going to tell us all about why Microchip is wired connectivity. Welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Many thanks, Mike.
It's great to have you on. So to kick off, can you tell me a little bit about your role at Microchip?
Absolutely. Well, my role is in strategic marketing within one of the business units at Microchip, one of the larger business units. And in strategic marketing, I'm looking at where we need to be a few years out in terms of capabilities, products, IP, all that kind of good stuff. And many of the things we've done over the last 20 to 23 years, I've had an involvement in one way or another. But I'm more forward-looking. I'm looking at what we need to be doing a few years out from where we currently are.
That's interesting. So what sort of products do you cover in your role in the USB and Networking Group?
Well, we've got a pedigree in all things networking, all things USB, connectivity in general in that sense. And then more recently, PCI and PCIe. So more connectivity from a group that was really formed to solve problems in USB and networking. So USB, networking, and PCIe now.
That's interesting. I'd like to dig in a bit into PCIe. I mean, that was originally developed for PCs. So how is PCI being used by Microchip's customers today?
Good question. Well, absolutely, we recognize PCIe started in mainstream PC space. Makes a lot of sense there. But we've got to remember that there's even more powerful compute now in one's hand with mobile devices and those kind of platforms. They find homes in markets beyond consumer and industrial, automotive, and similar. Energy is a massive market now also. And we find that it's a convenient and accessible bus interconnect for peripherals in all of those markets. So it benefits greatly from its history in the PC space, but now that makes its way into the embedded space more and more.
So you talk about it connecting buses. Presumably what it's doing is joining together effectively, ports where data's coming and going out of systems. So why is PCI a great solution for doing that today?
Well, it enables a peripheral, an endpoint in PCIe to get into system memory without hindrance much more quickly than it could otherwise do. Things are natively connected as memory devices effectively. So we have our endpoints that we deliver, networking, USB, slower speed peripherals, things that really matter to our customers that enable the back panel or the front panel of their product. But there are other examples where those devices and endpoints don't actually need to leave the board at all. They could just stay on the board. We can look towards some of the deeply embedded single board computer examples in that case there. But either way, it's a really convenient way to get into the system architecture and allow those peripherals to be harnessed by the operating system.
So it sounds like you're saying there's a combination between performance and also sort of ease of use within the system.
Absolutely. It's a nice defined abstraction that enables us to have this switched architecture from the system right the way down to the peripheral. And we see that propagating not only with PCIe, but with networking as well. So networking, of course, is a switched architecture in that sense. And we'll see both of those being used in the automotive space and people that mirror things that happen in those markets there, where big decisions are now being made on how interconnects are done between platforms of compute and between zonal architectures within the vehicle itself. So a lot happens there. We see that echoing forward into agricultural markets, which really represent a factory on wheels effectively. So quite a disruptive space there in a very positive way. But common to all of those is a need for this type of connectivity and done well.
I mean, that's interesting. It feels to me that, companies who are developing tractors perhaps are going to need a lot of support for designing with PCIe. It seems like a big step forward in technology. I mean, how does Microchip ensure that engineers get the support they need so they can get their PCIe designs to market quickly?
Well, we have a multi-level approach to servicing customer support in all the regions and geographies that make sense to perform that function. We recognize our customers will need assistance through their design stages and then through their product validation stages. We're no strangers to that journey, so we enjoy taking our customers on that journey with our products also. The company benefits from scale. Microchip is a massive company. One of the things I really appreciated when I got involved with Microchip many years ago now was their application support infrastructure, right the way from traditional applications, embedded systems engineers in the field working very closely with customers, through to corporate applications, which are more remote from the customer, but very accessible across all the different time zones. So we find there that there are many touch points that our customers can get involved with to alleviate design burden and risk. Coupled with the validation flows we apply to silicon as well, means our customers generally have a very quick time to market without drama. It's great to see that happen in action.
That's interesting. I mean, clearly the support and the people to answer questions is one side of it. But what about the software? Because I mean, these are quite complex devices. Is it important that you provide software solutions as well for engineers?
Absolutely is. Yeah, software is a key part of what we do and features within its own pipelines and similar. And we have to remember here that many of the silicon companies that we've all grown up around, primarily hardware companies, but many years ago really had to embrace software burden and understand that, recognizing it as a product in its own right. So we benefit from that here. You'll notice quite often with our platforms, we release a device, a chip effectively, and then it'll have a whole software suite behind it to make our customers' journey that little bit easier. Now, that may go all the way through to the inboxing of drivers, having drivers natively available in an operating system. I do recall when I first got involved with Windows 11, I had a rather technical weekend preparing some demonstrations for trade shows, and I couldn't bring that platform up with its native peripherals on the board. The drivers just weren't available in this new operating system, new hardware, new software. But sure enough, I happened to have an evaluation board for one of our USB devices, a USB network controller, and that had been present and inboxed for years within the Windows distribution, and there it was again in Windows 11. So the first updates that platform ever saw after being built for the very first time came via, as it happened, a LAN 7800, a USB networking device. So that's one good example, a real example of how software has enabled customers to have a drama-free journey with their product.
That sounds good. I mean, the PCIe obviously is interesting, but what about some of these other products? I mean, what about USB? Is that still, again, a PC type technology, or are you really seeing that being deployed in industrial?
It's a fascinating space. I recall us introducing USB hubs around about 2001. Actually, it was before then, but we had USB hubs at that time frame, and that had entered into the PC space. I think it was around about 96. And our industrial customers really started to embrace that technology between 4 and 5 years later. That's just what happened at that point there, where serial ports started to be replaced by USB ports. Now, we'll recognize that the two exist side by side, but USB absolutely matters into our embedded customers. Years ago, we recognized that they really didn't benefit from all the validation and testing that was brought with that protocol in the PC space, because these customers weren't designing PCs. So we had to go over and above to make sure there were no surprises in the embedded world, interoperability between different host controllers, for example, USB links. It was really an education many years ago, but we learned a lot in those days. We benefited because we always took our silicon design and validation very seriously. And even more so now, Microchip reaches so many customers, you have to think about that long tail of customers right at the design start. And even before, we're doing IP selection right now on a new program that won't go into design until probably next summer. But we've got to make the right decisions early on to make sure that customer journey is neat in 5-6 years when it starts to happen. So there's a couple of examples there from our USB background.
That's interesting. And also, as I understand it, I mean, USB now is actually pretty high performance. There's pretty high data rates supported by the standard.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're involved front and center. We're shipping USB hubs in very high volumes, all we have done for many years at low, full, high speed, super speed plus. We're shipping a USB host control, an NX-HICKey host control within one of our PCIe devices right now. So all of these different flavors of connectivity we find are needed by our customers. We just have to make sure we do them well. It's been interesting with the USB hub business over the years because we've already made a point of asking customers what they're connecting to upstream from us and downstream from us. And that's opened many interesting conversations at our clients, to the point where we started integrating controllers within hubs. Many years ago, we did that. And we released those as smart hubs. So the hub provides a hub function, more ports of USB, but also slow speed peripheral functions right at the hub as well. And they came about for those kind of interesting conversations, discovering applications with our clients.
Sounds cool. And it's amazing, how broadly USB spread, particularly, in the industrial sector. I mean, it feels like you cover an awful lot of products. I feel I need to ask you about the networking products. Can you just give us a bit of an overview about what Microchip does for networking products?
Sure. That's a fantastic place. Microchip over the years has acquired many companies, and in networking, you'll see companies such as SMSC, Micrel, Vitesse by Microsemi, and add all those together, and you have the essence of the business unit that I'm involved with within Microchip. So we do really well in networking, specializing in things like the physical layer right the way through to switch fabric. So we have expertise and IP ownership that enables us to build out to the cable and then generate access controller layers behind that silicon. We enable those as things like USB controllers, network controllers and bridges, PCIe network controllers and bridges. We're still shipping today a PCI network controller that we released in the early 2000s, and also memory mapped peripherals and networking devices there. I can think of one we released in 2001, still shipping that today in volume. Now that takes us then to concentration of ports and of bandwidth. We start looking towards our switch fabric. And that really is a fantastic piece of IP that represents across many different products, supported by an entire switch operating system as well that supports our industrial customers and small to medium business customers as well. So we're front and center in that space. There's a lot of interest at the moment in software-defined networking. We're recognizing that. We have to adopt APIs and be able to work with a model-based approach in the network. And of course, we did a lot of work with TSN and prior to that, telecoms, ITU standards related to networking. Those guys had to get it right before TSN existed. So they have their own suite of protocols we still support to this day. So a broad range of capabilities in the world of networking.
That's incredible. I mean, it brings it home that, you're really focused on this industrial market, talking about still supplying PCI products, which obviously in the computing market would be considered to be, outdated. I mean, one of the markets you mentioned was automotive. That strikes me as being pretty challenging. Don't you have to do a lot more work to qualify products for automotive?
Absolutely, we do. Yeah, I mentioned earlier in our conversation that we think about what we're doing way before we start the design of a product. And that's absolutely our philosophy in the automotive space. Working to that kind of rule set enables us to consider different markets for our products at release. So many of the products that we release will go down two different tracks, one for industrial style markets and then one for automotive style markets. That has its own set of rules that we have to adhere to. I'm seeing quality figures in today's products that I'd never seen before. They're fantastic. Really fantastic figures for device quality. And that enables us to participate in the automotive markets as successfully as we do. So yeah, that's a key point for us to be involved with, and again with software as well. So brilliantly positioned for things like the cyber resilience legislation that we're starting to see all around the world. I would say our internal design rules and similar have been with those in mind for many years now.
It's interesting you talk about, designing to ensure that you meet some of the new standards that are coming out. I mean, connectivity products are pretty complex products to design and make. So how do you ensure that these products work? I mean, what's the process? What makes Microchip the people to go to for something is going to work first time?
Well, I take great confidence in the amount of time and effort and money we spend on validation of silicon and software. We've been active members of things like the UNH Interoperability Lab for many, many years now. I can't think of a time when we haven't been involved there. So that's based at the University of New Hampshire, for example. And that is a third-party interoperability lab. And when we make a networking product, for example, we want absolute confidence that it's going to work, meet specification, and interop nicely with all the different link partners it's going to see over the course of its life. And that's one example of how we do that. It uniquely empowers us then to take a journey with our customers together when they have to look at validation of their end product, because we've already done that for the pieces that we're involved with. So I can think back many years ago now when we started guiding customers on things like electrical testing and similar for networks, because we had to do it anyway. And we made a point of documenting that, so we made our customers' lives a little bit easier. So now when I work with the team and we put a business plan together, There's a big item in there related to validation of silicon, and I have no problems at all with it because it brings a great amount of confidence further down the line. Simply representing itself as, we don't see returns in many cases. Our customers don't have the complaints I hear with other situations. So I take confidence from that.
That's good to hear that, Microchip's investing so much to remove potential pain from customers. So I really like that. I think that's great. We've talked a little bit about collaborations with other business units, but I'm really interested to know, what are kind of interesting collaborations where you're working with the other business units in Microchip?
Yeah, they're fantastic. There's something for everybody in that product portfolio. It kind of surprises me because it's really broad. So we've enjoyed partnerships in the past with our various microcontroller business units. That's been great for us. We've integrated microcontroller cores into our products and made those available for our customers to jointly run code on. Think about motor drives, for example, with network connectivity, EtherCAT connectivity, and Profinet. They all happen because of joint working between the business units. Security became a big deal many years ago. Now we had a capability and we brought that into the work that we were doing collectively. And then we see other forms of analog connectivity represented by things like SPI abstractions to serial interfaces and other bridges. And it's great knowing the people that go to the business units of those products. They can tell you about the journey they've been on. So yeah, an awful lot of collaboration between the BUs, business units within the company. And we're fortunate to have so many of them.
That's interesting. You're collaborating with so many, and I think maybe it's because you are actually, one of the bigger divisions, as I understand it, for a company that I think is known really as microcontrollers. From what I understand, you do an awful lot of business in the networking and USB sector.
Yeah, we absolutely do. It's quite easy to fall into that trap of just thinking microcontrollers, but it's by far more than that, very, very broad and varied. Being that we work in connectivity, we're slightly different in that sense because we're kind of this agnostic, trusted partner to many of our clients on the areas that we're involved with. And it's interesting hearing their journeys on the other selections that they have to make when they build a product effectively with all these different building blocks. But yeah, we're one of the larger business units within the company. And I'd say stride in many of the things we've been involved with. Customer design validation was one. I'll give you an example there as a platform that we called LAN Check for many years, where we would invite customers to share their designs with us before they commit to their first boards, their first widget effectively. And that would massively de-risk our customers' design and therefore their first PCBs. Worked really well. Microchip took that, scaled it, and that's now used across many of the different business units to reduce risk in their respective areas as well. So it's nice seeing things like that contributing back corporately into Microchip as a whole from this connectivity group that we're specifically talking about today.
That's really great. And actually, in the podcast, we've heard from some other business units that have talked about exactly that, the reviewing of designs for customers and how important it is for them now. So it's great to hear that originated in the wired connectivity business. I'm looking more broadly, it feels like we've covered an awful lot of ground here. The business unit's pretty broad in terms of its products. I mean, do you have one bit of engineering advice you could give to listeners if they're looking to add either higher performance or more wired connectivity to their design? What's the best way to go about it?
Well, there are many options available to the designer, and I'd say that the information is very accessible also across various different vendors. I definitely encourage people to take an inquisitive view in their designs when they're working on a design. I don't think you've always got to do something a certain way because it's always been done that way. I'm seeing some very positive, disruptive thinking in the market in recent years as people have started to embrace new technology that's become available to them. Examples can be found in the world of PCIe. That's being applied in spaces you wouldn't particularly think of applying PCIe. It's almost a network-based approach to some of our clients. And similarly in networking, there's lots of features available within modern networking devices that can articulate a real difference to a customer's end product, whether that be a need for redundancy in network links or additional bandwidth or making bandwidth available on an application level or just making things coherent, something we really take for granted. But there are many applications that require some reference to time, some kind of coherence. And that's really been baked into networking products over the last 15 to 20 years. Those features are available to clients where if you're wanting to discipline some kind of coherent subsystem using timing from a network, it's quite easy to do these days. So take an inquisitive view in your designs, reach out, get to know people within the vendors as well. Yeah, there's some interesting conversations to be had there, and that'll help accelerate customers' designs. So I guess that's what I would share from my perspective.
That's great advice, Ian. I really appreciate that. And I think hopefully there'll be a lot more engineers being a little bit more inquisitive and trying some different approaches to their next systems. As I said earlier, there's an awful lot surrounding what you do in the business unit. How would you sum up the products you make and the markets you serve? I mean, what would you really like people to remember about Microchip and wired connectivity?
I'd say that we strive to be the people that you'd come to for our flavors of connectivity. We do an awful lot. It's kind of scary as we've talked about all these different things we're involved with in our conversation today. It really is a gentle reminder that we're busy people, but we've been doing it well. We've been doing it for a long time. I think we maybe take it for granted, but we are very, very busy. We get a lot done with the people in our team there. So I would say, look at what you've heard from us today in terms of product capabilities. If you're interested in those products, then there's a whole trove of information available via the usual channels, which for us are our product web pages, our socials, our forums, and similar. Most people that we interact with have developed their My Microchip account, and with that, they can get access to even more information, non-disclosed information, and similar. So there's lots of routes available there where people can learn more about these kind of products and give us some feedback as well, because we'd love to hear from customers on how they're using these things that we've made and how it's solving problems for them and how we can make them better in the future, of course, as well.
Thanks so much, Ian. It's been a fascinating journey into the world of wired connectivity. And obviously, if people want to learn more, go to the Microchip website, find out more about these products. Ian, thanks so much for your insight and your knowledge. I've really appreciated it.
I've really enjoyed that, Mike. Yeah, it's been great talking to you today.
Thanks for listening to the Microchip Is podcast. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform to keep learning about the many technologies, products, and people that make Microchip what it is today. Look out for our upcoming Microchip Is podcasts and our new Beyond the Microchip podcast series.